So we've made it to the finish line of the Ahsoka live-action series. I'm your host, Mike Burton of Star Wars Comics and Canon and of Genuine Chit-Chat, and I've spent the last 7 weeks discussing the Ahsoka live-action shows with a different guest every week. Some guests have been very, very positive. Some guests have been very negative. I've kind of been along for the ride and agreeing and disagreeing at certain points, but I think this is not the most consistent show. But now they're at the end, I had a fun ride. It was good. But joining me is an individual who is always doing a ridiculous amount of things in the best ways, and even at the moment is releasing a podcast coming out every day of the week to celebrate Banned Books Week, as well as all kinds of other amazing things, which links will be in the description for those. But I'm joined by Ms. Tonya Todd to talk about Ahsoka Part 6, The Jedi, The Witch And The Warlord, which is a fantastic name. Tonya, how have you been finding, like we were talking for half an hour, so I don't need to ask you on air how you're doing. I know how you're doing. But how have you found, like before this episode, how have you found the Ahsoka series sort of up before this episode started? What were you kind of thinking?
So you mentioned something in your introduction. You said the show has been up and down. It's been inconsistent. And I wasn't clear whether you were talking about Ahsoka or your show, because you said
Ahsoka.
sometimes the conversation was very upbeat and happy, and sometimes it was very negative. But I think that's because Ahsoka was inconsistent.
Mm-hmm.
There are moments where it's like, this is just fantastic. The moments where they're calling back to the Clone Wars and just some of the stuff, the visual elements that we've seen on screen are gorgeous and amazing and heart-wrenching, And then other times you're like, what is this crap that I'm watching right now? How is this happening? How is this the same show?
I didn't want to say it before in the intro because I didn't want to inadvertently put words in your mouth, but I thought this is going to be a very balanced conversation because you are also, people don't know this, but I often think of you very similarly to Rosario Dawson, who is my favorite actress as well, I might add. So, you're up there. But the irony that
that's a huge compliment. I love her. She is a fantastic actress and she happens to be gorgeous. And when I saw that I don't like spoilers, but I'm also an actress. So sometimes I get notifications that I don't want. And when I saw her name attached to the Star Wars universe, I was like, oh, it's Ahsoka. She's going to be Ahsoka. Who else would it be? She looks just like her. It's going to be her.
And she does amazingly. So I want to ask before we delve into this episode, like obviously you said the series has been up and down, which I agree with. To clarify my Star Wars conversations, they've been up and down, but not in a bad way. It's been good having a variety of positions. Certain people such as Thomas, he adores the whole series, thinks it's the best thing ever, and finds it hard to fault. I disagree, but I appreciate his enthusiasm. Ben is the opposite. Ben finds it very hard to compliment the show and doesn't enjoy it almost at all and hasn't enjoyed any live-action Star Wars bar Andor, which I, again, don't agree with, but I see where he's coming from. So I'm glad we had this balance here. But what have you thought about the different actors? Now that we're at the end of everything, I know Hera wasn't quite on screen as much, but we spoke about Rosario as Ahsoka. So you've got Sabine, obviously Ezra, and Hera as the kind of legacy characters.
I didn't like most of the castings. I didn't. And not because I don't like the actors per se, but, when you have an animated program, you have just such a distinct image of what these people are going to look like. And I think that Ezra is the only one that they got right. Part of that has to be because this is someone who aged significantly, so he doesn't have to match quite as well. Mm-hmm. But with Hera, her facial structure isn't the same. Mm-hmm. So she's a lovely actress and very talented, but she doesn't look like her. And in fact, I think she looks much younger because of the makeup, because they smoothed her face so much with the makeup. She looks too young for the role, and I think she acted too young for the role too. She should be more mature than how she was portrayed here. After the things that she has gone through and raising a child on her own and becoming part of the rebellion, she should be more mature and wise and less, I don't know, she just seemed just as adolescent as Sabine.
Yeah.
And then Sabine, I think she did a better job of acting like the character. but she still didn't look like her because she had such distinct eyes in the series, and this actress didn't have that. They tried with the makeup, but she just didn't have it.
Yeah, it's a hard one because there's certain people, especially individuals who are really into comics or when there's other content which characters have already appeared in. And it is hard because I know certain individuals have said, look, first priority is that the actor looks like the character. Second priority is performance. And other people are the opposite. And you like, at the end of the day, you do, even if you've got, unless you've got like gold dust, you have to choose slightly more one than the other.
Right.
You know? And it's a hard one to pick. And I would say that agreeing with you that Hera, and I love Mary Elizabeth Winstead. I absolutely adore her. And in fact, her and Rosario Dawson are probably two of my favourite actors or actresses. I don't know whether to say actresses because it makes it sound like it devalues them.
It's fine. Why? Why would it devalue them? There's nothing less than a woman.
Because I'm having to specifically say their gender while like pointing out that they are their professor. It's like calling a doctor a doctorette. It's like, I know that's not a real word, but it's like, why is that role have a gender to it, whereas almost no other roles in a job do? This is me.
Tons of other roles in jobs do.
Yeah.
That doesn't make it okay. But to say the phrase that it devalues someone to mention that they're female, you should check that.
I mean, I don't feel that way.
Why would they be less than because they're female?
I don't feel that way in any way, shape or form. I just know that it's the assumption thing, isn't it? I mean, I can't delve into it here, but I think it's part of the they them movement is because of the assumptions that come with one's gender, which is, it shouldn't be the way it is. But because of the way society is structured, there is certain baggage that comes with identifying one's gender as male or female with certain individuals in this world. It means that there can be a knock-on effect. I personally don't care if you're an actor or an actress or Actor X, if that is ever going to become a thing. Like, I'm not fussed.
If it bothered them, if I knew that it bothered them, then I would just refer to them however they chose. Mm-hmm. But because you know what you mean, you're just saying actress. Like, you're not saying it in any kind of derogatory way, as long as you don't think an actress is any less than an actor. No, by no means. I do not mean that in any way. I'm sorry if anyone thought that. But it was me tripping over myself and then trying to explain it rather than just moving on, which is on me. But Ezra, I personally think that Ezra is probably the best cast person in the entire series, in my view. What did you think of him? I don't think in the entire series, because I think Rosario Dawson was better.
Technically, she was in Book of Boba Fett and Mandalorian, so she was actually before the series.
Oh, so you just meant... I thought you meant the Star Wars.
No. Not in all of Star Wars. But in this show, I mean, I think Rosario is... and her...
Not universe, but, these shows that they're taking from
the Mandoverse, kind of.
Yeah, I thought you meant all of these characters from the Clone Wars and Rebels. I thought you were including all of that.
No, I think Ahsoka... Rosario Dawson blew me away as Ahsoka. So she's a given. I should have illustrated that more. She's a given, but I think of pretty much everything else in the Mandoverse, apart from.
I think they got Chopper right.
Yeah,
they did a great job with him, but of the actual people, I said this earlier that I think Ezra, of the new characters that were introduced here from the animated series, he was the best.
Mm-hmm. And what have you thought about the two newer characters, Baylan Skoll and Shin Hati or Hatai, pronounced different every time I hear it? What do you think of them?
I thought that they were fascinating to watch, and I wished we had more resolution with them. And I'm really sad that Ray Stevenson died, because I think they were setting up something pretty awesome, and now we'll never get to see it. We'll never get to know.
I think they'll recast him.
You do?
Yeah, almost certainly. There's too much that he's been built on. You can now no longer write that out, because skipping right to the end, one of the last things we saw is Baylan on the statue. Did you recognize what the statue was of and things? Because this is the only.
I didn't remember what they were called, but I did recognize them.
So they're from the Mortis arc.
In the Clone Wars, right?
Correct. Yeah, it's the mother, the daughter, the father, the daughter, and the brother. Yeah, the mother is Abeloth, who's in Legends, and I'm not going to delve into that because it's a whole podcast in itself. But yeah, the Mortis arc of the Clone Wars, one of my favourite story arcs in the whole of the Clone Wars. But people like Amazing Math who's not seen the Clone Wars yet, because we do a Clone Wars rewatch next year. So he doesn't know what the hell I'm talking about, these Mortis gods. As like, and I keep mentioning them and teasing him about them. But with him, I think, it's all culminating, Shin's a renegade to a degree. Balin's trying to find his own thing. It's going to be loosely to do with probably the World Between Worlds, because obviously that was connected in Rebels, in that episode with Ezra, and how Ahsoka came back. So there's all these things pointing to this beyond stuff. So I think that where that's going to go, it's him going to be trying to find this, and Ahsoka being like, we need to stop whatever he's going to be doing, because he's going to probably try and alter the past, even that's not possible, stuff like that. But I'm almost certain they'll recast him. I mean, they have recast people in the past, normally because of age, not because of unavailability, but I think they're going to have to with how they've built this up. But everyone else in this, like, what do you think of like Lars Mikkelsen, and what have you thought of like did you like him live action, even though he was the voice in Rebels?
I didn't, because I'm attracted to Thrawn. Like, he was so sexy in the series, but now he just looked like and it's so rude, but he looked like a withering old man. He had no physical power or prowess. His voice was still amazing. And I'm glad that they gave him an opportunity to do it. I just wish he had, his facial structure doesn't resemble the character. They didn't know that they were going to do a live action one. However, if they had cast someone who looked more like him and he didn't have the right voice, it would have been even more problematic. So I can at least say, you know what? He's been living on this kind of deserted planet. He is much older. Look at his troops. They don't look like they're able to take care of their equipment. So life's been hard. It wore on him. I'm glad they went with the voice rather than, okay, well, he looks physically like the character, but he has a very whiny voice or something, or, he does not even, he can't even pronounce the words the same way he would. Because his voice on its own is chilling and sexy, and just he's such a sapiosexual dream,
Yeah. I mean, I was torn with Lars Mikkelsen, because I was so excited when I heard that he was going to be reprising his role, and I've seen him in other stuff. He's amazing. Like in Sherlock Series 3, in the finale, he plays the villain, and that's basically Thrawn. And I was like, it's going to be that, and it wasn't. And I was like, oh, I'm hoping he gets more direction, I guess, and more emphasis in whatever he's going to be in next. I mean, I've spoken about quite a lot of these pods, but you don't know, so whatever he's in next. But we're not going to do spoilers here.
Don't you think that they didn't use him properly in this? Because
there's reasons why.
There's this whole thing where it's like, we're going to make it the big thing, finding Thrawn and finding Ezra. So either that needs to drag out until the end, and that's the big thing that teases us for whatever comes next, or once we find them, big things need to happen. But they didn't. Like, the episode where they found him was kind of dull. Yeah. That's the issue. Been just this amazing moment where everyone's like, no way. And no, it was, okay, so what are we doing with all this stupid stuff over here? Could we possibly focus on the important character here? And no, he was just kind of there. There was nothing legendary about this moment. We're not going to talk about this for decades to come. Like, the moment where Darth Vader shows up in, why can I not think of the name of the, yes, that wasn't part of the original trilogy, but that moment, we're going to love that forever. And it's the same kind of situation. This was his reveal. He's already an existing character. We finally get to see him in this other movie, and they did him proper. They did not do that with Thrawn. It was just like, okay, so he's there. I thought that the witches were far more exciting.
The witches are very cool, and I'm glad that they've come out the other side. Although I knew from the start, I found Morgan so weak. Nothing against the actress, but I thought the performance was bland. I thought the writing of the character was boring. And I was like, everyone I spoke to unanimously just said, one-dimensional, mustache-twirling villain who's going to be killed by Thrawn at the end or is going to die to save Thrawn. And literally since the first episode, everyone just all said the same thing. And that happened. It was like, how exciting.
She was better in Mandalorian.
Well, because she had a shred of personality in Mandalorian.
She was so dull in this. I was like, is it the same actress? Like, what changed?
The script.
At least we got to see her fight, and I thought that she did a great job in the fight scenes in this. Like, it looked like her body was finally doing what it was meant to do.
Yeah, I think my biggest issue with this show is it just feels like a giant prologue. That's that.
It does.
And it doesn't feel essential, and that's the problem. Because, being a fan of Rebels, the best, I stand by, as I've said a million times, come and get the bingo card, Rebels is the best piece of Star Wars content that exists, I'd say. If someone wants to disagree, I'd evenly say, okay, on par with the original trilogy and a couple of the heavy hitter games and maybe heavy hitter books. But for me, it's the best thing. It gets better and better every time. And what it does simultaneously is it introduces you to new characters, you get intrigued and invested in new characters, while also connecting to the wider Star Wars universe in fun little ways. So you don't have to have watched any other Star Wars content to enjoy Rebels, but when you do, you're like, oh my god, this is incredible. And Rebels adds stuff to all other Star Wars it touches. That's what makes it strong. Clone Wars did something similar, but not quite the same, because you really need to watch the prequels. But I found with this, I'm just like, this just feels like them going, we're going to need Ezra and Thrawn back, because we've got plans for stuff. But not enough people are going to watch just another animated series. And we can't just launch a movie explaining why these characters got found. So what do we do? We're at point A, we need to get to point C. What do we do? And point B was, let's make a series. And it's annoying because,
because Ahsoka deserved better.
Well, Ahsoka did deserve better, but also so did Hera, so did Sabine. I mean, Ezra, I thought Ezra was fantastic. Him and Baylan Skoll were my favourite parts of the whole series, but I'm just like, this just isn't the issue. And I kind of came to the conclusion last episode when I spoke with Angry Andy, and it's quite depressing that none of the live action Star Wars, apart from the odd episode or odd moment, aside from Andor, am I going to rewatch again in full. And I want to know, do you feel the same now that we're at the end of this?
I do.
And what's your whole view?
There are moments I will rewatch, but I would not rewatch this entire series. I was so disappointed with Obi-Wan.
Mm-hmm.
Andor, I thought, was fantastic.
Yeah.
That had great writing, great acting. Like, they had the whole thing, the whole package there. Boba Fett was the most disappointing.
Yeah.
Because they had all of this build up, and then, he's not even going to be in this for like half the time. And then they kind of did that same thing in The Mandalorian. Well, now he's not going to be in it all the time. Like, could you stick with the main character of your show? Build a storyline around your main character. And then these other people can be side stories. But instead, they're making main characters side characters in their own stories. It's not working.
No. And what have you thought of Ahsoka's character throughout this? Because it's felt inconsistent. What I get what they're going for is basically she was unbalanced, and then she had the world between worlds interaction, and then she came out the other side being who she should be. But did you feel that immediately? Did you think they did it in the best way? How did you feel about Ahsoka's growth as a character in the show?
I don't think it was dramatic enough, and I think she felt kind of light. The lows weren't low enough and the highs weren't high enough. I wanted there to be a more dramatic difference and not just, well, everything's going to be fine and I'm just going to smirk. But I don't blame her for that. That is still the writing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a tough one because I found myself, this is again one of the shows I'm kind of having to be an apologist for. And it's quite upsetting, really. I mean, with Mando Series 3, I did really enjoy it. And I think most of the criticisms are hard to argue with. It's more just, are you fine with Bo-Katan taking up more screen time? Yes or no? And if you are, you'll enjoy the show more. And if you're not, you won't enjoy the show as much.
I like her a lot, but she deserves her own show and let him have his show, and there can be crossover. I like when characters make a cameo on each other's shows, but don't take it over.
Yeah, that's the thing. And it's like, I think Mando Series 3 is great. I didn't think, it's not the perfect show, but again, as I've said before on the show, it's like every Star Wars show that's live action apart from Andor, I would not recommend them to people who don't like already love Star Wars. And that's kind of what I wanted Ahsoka to be. I want Ahsoka to be the quality of Andor with the emotional and Force-related weight of Clone Wars and Rebels. And I thought if they can do that, it's going to be not only the best Star Wars show, it's going to be one of the best pieces of Star Wars content in existence. And then it was like, it just kind of feels like The Mandalorian, but with Ahsoka.
There were moments where it touched on those emotional pulls, but it wasn't quite the ending. Yeah, like it should have been at the ending. We should have felt like this is a great ending and I can't wait to see what comes next. It was like, oh, so that's how they're going to end it? Like, that's really it? Thrawn's whole mission is just to leave this planet? Like, that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
That's pretty small goal.
Like 4
episodes.
Like,
he's too big of a character for such a small goal. That should be a piece of his plan, not the whole thing.
Yeah. Because was your favourite part of the whole series the World Between Worlds episode? Because it's been divisive. Some people think it's amazing because of the emotional beats, but other people, and I think fairly, say it has the least amount moving the plot forward, and therefore it's just a middling episode in a way.
You know, I don't know that I could say a specific episode is my favorite right now. I think I would have to re-examine what happened in which episode. I can tell you some of my favorite moments.
Do it.
There was the one, is that the one where I messaged you after I saw it, or is just thank you for making me watch Clone Wars and Rebels because I would not have appreciated what I'm seeing on screen. This stuff wouldn't matter that much. It would be cool, but I wouldn't be having such an emotional reaction because I wouldn't see the clones out there fighting and these images that I've already seen in the animated series. And then there's watching Anakin go back and forth between Darth Vader and like that. Those were really great visuals and they had touches of the music. So those were some of my favorite moments, but that doesn't mean that the episode was my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
And I really feel like once they found Thrawn, the whole thing just slowed down. I thought that was going to be, that was probably my least favorite episode because it was so disappointing. We're working up toward this moment. You said that you loved Ezra. I'm not saying I loved him. I thought he was well done for what, I didn't like him in the series. Remember, I didn't like him on Rebels.
I wasn't as much of a fan in Rebels. I've liked him a lot more here than I did in Rebels.
I thought he was accurately depicted here.
Yeah, that's more what I meant. Like, that is Ezra. Like,
right.
Their reunion was weak as fuck. Okay, I don't give a shit what anyone says. And it was so weak. So weak. And I was like, oh, what have they done to my boy? And then the next episode, I was like, this guy, he's either been directed by a god, which by Filoni's previous experience is unlikely, or he genuinely watched all of Star Wars Rebels and got Ezra. I would genuinely, I'm not sure I could even fathom how someone could perform that close to Ezra without watching all of Rebels. Like, I know there are probably actors out there that are that good.
Watch it.
Sorry?
You probably did watch it. Like, why wouldn't you when you know that you have to get into the background of this character? You have to know what happened to him and you have to see his attitude.
That's the thing. Ezra is a lot of what's not spoken. That's one of my draws with him, is a lot of his turmoil you see in Rebels, which again is so weird because Filoni is so good at subtext and being subtle with things and what is not said. And then when it's in live action, it's like, let's do the opposite. It's like,
yeah,
why? Why? I don't understand. You've got mannerisms. You have body language to show these things easier than animation. You're like, nope, let's not do that. Let's do the opposite. And I'm like, what?
Or let's do that and then wait 2 beats and then say it too.
It's like, what a waste of space. I feel like this series, when I saw it was 8 episodes, I was like, sick. And then I finished it. I'm like, should have been 6. Like, it's every time now with apart from Andor, where I was like, no, Andor, perfect. Can't criticize that. But with Ahsoka, I was just like, if this was 6, it'd have really tightened things up. If you didn't end on the reunion between Ezra and Sabine, which was weak, if you'd have let that, if that had been near the start, and you'd have then let them kind of flower in a way, because in the next episode when they're sitting on the notees moving thing and they're talking, I was like, this dialogue here is what I live for. It has no relevance to the plot. And although there's points which are stupid because she keeps not explaining how she got there, the way he's interacting with Sabine, that for me is like, this is how you do. That's how you get an animated character and put them into live action. That's what you do. And then it was just like, yeah, but let's just have loads of other episodes of just wandering around and nothing really equating to anything. And it's like, no, Filoni, how can you get so much right? And then other parts so wrong in the same series. I know he didn't direct all the episodes, but the directors of them directed quite a few Mando episodes, and I'm like, it's so hard to put your finger on why things didn't work.
It's not connecting.
Yeah, it's bothering me because
you're right. They had all of these great elements, and they feel like they're in the wrong places. Either do this at the beginning and then build towards something amazing, or make the build up the amazing thing. Just draw it out and then give us this phenomenal climax. But instead, it was like kind of a mini orgasm in the middle that didn't finish. And then...
a nipple orgasm.
That better not be a soundbite.
I won't use it, don't worry. I will note that the individual who plays Ezra is Ayman Esfandi. I may be mispronouncing his name, but he did
a great job. Yeah. And he was an improvement on the Ezra from the animated series, which he should be. He should be more mature. But you could see it was still him, which made it a good performance because, okay, so he's not completely unannoying now.
He's still a little bit annoying, but he's interesting annoying. But that I think is my issue with Hera and with Sabine, which was they felt like they receded. It feels like instead of the characters growing
further along, not back to before the end of their series.
Yeah, it's weird. And one thing, like I generally liked this episode. I think this episode is amidst the stronger ones, I think. But I do think, oddly enough, I think the first half of the series is probably better than the second half. I think from the World Between Worlds episode, which I know is episode 5, so it's not, halfway is first 4 and second 4. But I think that the premiere I wasn't as fussed on because it was basically like, hey, you haven't seen Rebels, fuck you. But I'm going to tell you, I'm going to wrap it up so you kind of speed through. And all us Rebels fans were like, this is all really quite boring. And then, episode 3 and 4 were quite good. And then 5 was like, oh my God, this is incredible. And then 6 was like, meh. And then 7 was like, pretty good. And then this one was better. But
by the time we got to this one, I'm just going to watch it to enjoy it, not to pick it apart, not to think about everything they got wrong. I'm just going to sit here and enjoy the journey. And it was better. It was a better experience for me. And then we had some really great fight scenes in it. And I enjoyed those quite a bit.
Agreed. I loved the action in this. And I think it's getting harder and harder for Star Wars to make compelling action scenes that aren't just the same thing. Because it's just like, how much can you actually do with lightsabers? You can make them different colors, but
they did it. They did. They had the combination scenes, like, okay, the teamwork scenes, and then, well, now we have to do some scenes where it's one-on-one. They did a great job with that. I wouldn't complain about any of the actual fight scenes in this episode.
Did you have an issue with them in previous episodes?
Some looked a little like the episode where Sabine was ambushed at her house. That was pretty weak.
Yeah. But you got stabbed.
Like, come on. You don't have to be a Jedi to be able to do stuff. Like, she's an excellent fighter with all of these other methods. So why are you relying on this method that you're not good at and then getting outmatched because you're not using your real skills? Lean into what you do well, especially when your life depends on it. Like, you would think that those instincts would kick in. And I don't know. I think it was just kind of lame.
Yeah, I find it annoying because where the characters receded to a degree, but there was no clear... For something that feels in parts where this was a bit conflated, I feel like you could have easily added more depth and more issues. Like, why was there not really much talking about, oh, Sabine's been really struggling since Ezra left. Like, she got through the war, but then after the Battle of Andor, the Battle of Jakku, she had nothing to do. She fell into her training with Ahsoka in the grief of losing her family, could never commit, and she's never been the same. That one sentence, almost as I've said it, would literally have made everything make more sense in the first episode. And then Hu Yang going, if Hu Yang says that and then says to Ahsoka, and her being like that has clearly had a knock-on effect on you and Hera. Done. You've solved 80% of the issues I had with all the characters to begin with. But instead you took like ages to explain it through, and then you had this ambiguous collection of scenes that I loved with Anakin, but myself and Thomas debated for an hour and a bit over what it means, and my friend Ben came in and was like, if you have to do that, the scene is done badly. It's not meant to be an interpretation scene. It's literally meant to be, she has learned something, her character has changed. What is it? You don't know. So it's not done well. And I'm like, I can't disagree, unfortunately.
They need to hire you as their first beta watcher before the series goes live. Because you do this all the time. You're like, you could have cut this, moved this here, and it would have been a better series. And you're right. You have a gift for that after the fact. I don't know that you would be able to write a better series, but when you watch it, you see exactly what isn't working, what connects better, and how many episodes it could have been.
Yeah, and I think the issue with episodic format is the problem is where you have to have these mini conclusions in episodes that don't make sense thematically. And so either the ending of an episode feels lackluster, or it feels like you're cutting a conversation in half, which is almost better, but they don't do that. They get the whole story, and then they kind of clip it, and then they go, right, you need to write half a page of script to make this stop. But the next episode's going to continue on not from that point. Because the Ahsoka Ezra
television has been doing this for years. I mean, look at soap operas that have all of these mini stories.
Thing in the world.
I'm just saying, this is not a new concept. They should be.
Yeah, but it's annoying.
There are nighttime soaps. Like, there are plenty of series that have a mini conclusion at the end of the episode, but an overarching theme to, an overarching story for the entire season. They're not doing that here. They're just like, okay, so we need to make it finish and wrap it up here, and there, done. Okay, but what does it mean? Done.
Just less than an hour. Next.
Right.
Yeah, well, it's like, Buffy is a great example of it. There's the two ways you do a show like that. You do a show where it's just, it builds and builds and builds, like Game of Thrones or Andor. Andor's got arcs in it, so it's slightly different. But, a show which is, you have to watch the last episode to have any idea what's going on in the next one. Or you do a Buffy, more so like Mando Series 1, which is basically like, if you watch the first episode of the season and the finale, most of the stuff in the middle you can pick up because we give you 2% of the through line plot in every episode. So if you miss a couple of percent, the stuff you get from the episodes you don't miss makes sense. And that's how serialized television is meant to work. And that's why, excluding the previously on stuff, that's why Buffy and other shows like that have worked so well pre-streaming digital age with having a through line. And it's weird because Andor does it so well. And at Ahsoka, they're like, here's one big story, but let's split it into 7 little stories. And it was just, there were parts I'm like, this is, again,
it feels like the people with the money got in the way of good storytelling. That's what this feels like.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the fears, again, when I spoke with sort of Ben and to a degree Andy, this is one of the fears of Disney taking over. And I'm all for canon. They release the High Republic, they do loads of amazing stuff, and we wouldn't have any of the Star Wars stuff if Disney hadn't took over, okay? George Lucas was never going to make another trilogy, okay, guys? He hated making the prequels, or he loved it, and then everyone shat on him and sent him death threats, and he was like, I'm never doing this again, ever.
I'm done. I don't need the money.
No, exactly. I'm good. And that's why everyone's like, oh, George Lucas should come back. It's like, no, you all screwed up. You being toxic, horrible people are the reason he's never coming back. So, unless Disney pay him a shed load of money in 30 years. But aside from that, it's one of those things where it's like, with Disney taking over, the problem is where they've got so many plans of what's to come and where things are going to go, no individual stories seem to have freedom anymore. Andor did, because they did the end first. And they are like, no one's going to care about Andor. They are like, people involved are going to care, and it's a well-made show. But no one is like, if they don't make Andor properly, I hate Star Wars forever. Everyone was like, I don't care about Andor. And then it came out and they're like, oh my God. Whereas Ahsoka has got so much emotional weight to it. Exactly. So it's just a bit frustrating in that regard. But do you think this ending here, do you think it's a satisfying ending? Did you like the episode as a whole? What, like, if we delve a little bit into the episode itself, like, what were your kind of thoughts?
There were disappointing moments because, you know, you get to the end and you realize, oh, that's really all they're going to do. That's it. So we were just going, Ezra's home. Great. But even that moment wasn't that satisfying when he was there.
I don't know why they did it.
Say it again.
I don't know why they did it. Ezra going home is the one part which is the weakest element of this entire episode. It's not him leaving. When he was on Thrawn's ship, I was like, oh, that's going to be cool. Whatever they do with him next, I'd love to see him trying out on the Thrawn ship. And they're like, no, he makes his way back. He steals a ship from Thrawn, which I'm like, okay, no one's ever done that ever. So how the hell did he do that? He just managed to, what, fool everyone that he's not a stormtrooper, get on a ship and leave without being shot, and flew back to the New Republic without being tracked in theory, just to say hi to Hera. Like, why did you have to put that in?
They covered that with, oh, thanks, copy. Thanks for letting me know you're on your way. That's all it takes. Like, no one's going to be there when the ship flies in. It's just going to be this quiet thing. One person waiting. I don't think that's generally how it works when a ship arrives.
No. And we've seen Thrawn and how he acts around his stormtroopers in books, but also in Rebels, which this links mainly to Rebels, obviously, but does link to some of the Thrawn books. It's like, why? Like, Ezra should have been left there, and then whatever they do next, whether it's a series or one of the other projects they're doing, whatever's going to happen next, I just don't understand why they had to shortcut it. It felt like what they did with Mando and Grogu, except at least we got that in another show, somewhat. In this, we're like, oh, yeah, because I was so excited. I was like, oh, Thrawn and Ezra are going to get him interacting. Like, Ezra and Thrawn simultaneously figuring out the state of the galaxy while in the same ship, while Ezra's trying to hide from Thrawn. That could be a series almost in itself. And they're like, no, let's just skip over it. For what benefit?
What's the point of him getting on that ship? What was the point of that whole moment of her finally being able to use the Force, which seemed very far-fetched, by the way.
Yeah, that's
I can barely get my lightsaber when I'm about to die. But now suddenly I am completely confident that I can push him across here and he's going to believe her. You could not get me to trust her on that. Nope, I'll stay here. If you want to jump, I'll be happy to push you because I actually know how to use the Force. But yeah, I'm not jumping first. That's not happening.
Yeah, and she gave him the biggest Force push I've ever seen from a master. Like, you see masters in animation when Ezra and Kanan are doing the same thing. And it's like, even Kanan's like barely able to do that to Ezra. It's like, oh yeah, no, she can. It's like, but she hasn't had an Ahsoka moment where she's suddenly okay with everything. She just kind of found Ezra and is now slightly better at fighting. And it's like,
she finally got her lightsaber to come to her, and now magically I have enough control and strength that I can trust that I will be able to boost you across this huge gap where if I miss or I can't get it together, you'll die. Like, no, that was just the worst moment in the entire episode to me.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of that part, but I actually thought she was going to turn around. It was going to be Ahsoka there helping her, and I was going to be that makes sense. And it wasn't. I was like,
no,
okay, but yeah, Ezra,
like Simba roaring in the elephant graveyard. Like, it's not you, kid.
Yeah, that would have been good. Or she tries to do it and kind of holds him there for a second, and they slips it, and then he stops a little bit lower, and then Ahsoka, and they both do it. That made sense thematically. Them doing things together again, same effect. But no, they
just had her succeed, no explanation, and then she's not going to use the Force at any point afterward when she comes back to help with that fight.
No, but she is suddenly really much better at deflecting lightsaber bolts. It's like, what?
Well, that was only when she was up close. She's a good close combat fighter, so I forgave them for that.
Not by this series. By Rebels, I agree. Not in this series. She's been pretty bad.
Like, she was such a badass in Rebels, and here they weakened her character for, I don't know, plot armor, but it it didn't even work.
Like
it didn't
armor plot. It's written in reverse. It's like
right. They stripped her away, and it didn't make anything better.
No. It's frustrating. She's literally a Mandalorian. There's a whole series all about how Mandalorians are the best fighters. And in Rebels, her whole thing was she always wants to fight and she always wins. And she needs to learn life isn't just about fighting all the time. And that's her lesson through Trials of the Darksaber, which they reference. And they go, oh yeah, she's kind of not as much of a fighter. Yeah, she's not much of a fighter anymore. Oh, she's become more with the Force. Oh no, she's become less.
The worst Force wielder that they've ever seen.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay. Then why is she trying to be a Jedi? Just be a badass Mandalorian who happens to know how to wield a lightsaber. You don't have to be a Jedi. Do
you know why they can't? Because we've already got one of those. We've got Bo-Katan. So, that's how it feels sometimes. There was a point in, I think it was the last episode, when Ezra didn't use his lightsaber. And it annoyed me, because in this one he gets his lightsaber and he makes a new one. And I'm like, why? Why didn't... I know he says at one point, oh, you can use my lightsaber. Why didn't he say, this is going to be tough. I can survive without my lightsaber. You take it. It's yours now anyway. I'll figure something out. That's an Ezra thing to say. I'll figure it out. The Force is on my side. Like, he could have had that cheesy line. Fine. And the fight scenes with him without his lightsaber was cool. But the whole time I was like, but you are literally depowering yourself. And the only reason is because if you go against Shin with a lightsaber, you will absolutely destroy her. So the only way this scene that's been written, which didn't have to be written this way, but this scene being written where Shin and the Night Troopers all attack only works if Ezra doesn't have his lightsaber. So we're going to write a really weak, pithy reason, which is, I don't need my lightsaber anymore. The Force is on my side. And the next episode, he's like, I've made a new lightsaber. And it's like, but you just said...
You said you don't need it anymore.
It's like, there's people online who are rapidly defending it and going like, oh, he's gone beyond that. He's now like an hermit. It's like, no, he hasn't. He's just made a new one. It seems like that. And I'm just like, I don't get it. Like, why are you doing this to your own characters, Filoni? You wrote all this. Why have you depowered certain characters in certain ways? And I feel like, as you said, like Disney just coming in and going, okay, we need Sabine to be more of a Mandalorian Jedi because we're kind of doing that with Grogu. It'll be a cool team up in the future. Yeah. It can't be just a Mandalorian because we've got one of those. It's Bo-Katan. That's why Boba Fett had to be so shit, because the Mandalorian is basically Boba Fett. So it's all these kind of things like, what other characters can we get? Well, we've got this Jedi, and then let's get another Jedi, because we can't keep bringing Luke back because everyone keeps whinging about the deep fake but also refuse to recast him. So let's just put him over there and not really talk about him ever. And then now we've got Ezra. He's the guy Jedi. We've got Ahsoka, who keeps saying she's not a Jedi, but she kind of is, so who knows, loosely. And now you've got a Mandalorian Jedi. No, not Grogu. Now you've got this, and you're like, oh, come. It's like a trading card game with all these slightly different effects on everything. And it's just like, can we have good writing again, please?
Right. It's like they have a lot more money, but they're not applying it where it needs to go anymore.
Apart from to Baylan Skoll and Shin Hatai, who are so... Mainly Baylan is so capsulating and so interesting. I would have watched the whole series all about him. And I would... let's not do too much of it.
He was really great. Like, and that's not just the character, it's the actors. Like, you have to give him credit for making him feel so compelling. You know, and there's moments where you're like, I don't know who to root for here. You know?
Oh, yeah.
I kind of want to see him win.
Yeah, he had a very much like someone else described it as like a Qui-Gon Jinn, but like a dark side almost version of Qui-Gon Jinn, that kind of calm serenity. Yeah. And I love that. And I was like, that is it. That's really good. And I'm like, I said in the last pod as well, I was like, what's frustrating me about last week is I was more excited, and this hasn't been confirmed or anything, but I'm more excited by the prospect of a Baylan Skoll Shin Hati series of comics or book than I am about what they do next on screen with what we've just seen. And that's really, really depressing.
Oh no, books.
I've got a lot to read. But you know what I mean? Like this should be the series where when we all finish this, we should be like, I cannot wait to see what they do with Thrawn next. How's Ahsoka going to get out of it? And instead I'm like, I know exactly how this is going to end, unfortunately. Baylan, though, I got no idea.
And here's the thing. At the end, I was like, I have no idea what's next in the Star Wars universe. I am so out of the loop. I don't know what is planned next. And I'm not even compelled to look into it. It'll happen. I'll watch it. But I'm not going to be excited for anything because this didn't excite me for any future anything. It may have excited me if Ray Stevenson was still alive, because I would feel like something more is coming with him, and I can't wait to see what that is.
Yeah. It was more of a guarantee if he was still alive, but now it's more of a, are they gonna, we still don't know. I haven't really looked into details, and it's not really any of our businesses, but I don't think his cause of death has been released. And it may never get released, which is fine, but it is that kind of thing where sometimes the way in which someone passes also affects whether or not a company wants to, recast them and things. Mm-hmm. Sometimes if it's an illness, that no one knew about, like Chadwick Boseman, sometimes they're like, we want to respect that character. But other times they're like, okay, this person passed away for a reason we couldn't control, but we got their permission that we would have someone else do it, or, it's sometimes behind the scenes stuff is like that, depending. But yeah, I really want to know what's going to happen with him. I'm praying we get more from him. But like in the Star Wars, did you watch the first 2 series of Bad Batch?
Yes.
So there's a 3rd series of that coming out.
Okay.
And there's a live action show as well that is probably going to be out next year. And that's, apart from some of the other announcements, but I don't know how many other announcements you know of. So
I don't know any of them at this point.
Do you know any, this will be the last thing I ask, do you know anything about any movies? Because they've been pretty hard to miss on the internet.
I really don't.
Really?
But I've been extremely busy, so this isn't just
of course,
keeping my head in the sand and I don't want any spoilers. I just haven't had an opportunity to accidentally be spoiled. And then the other factor, I think, is that the biggest place where things were spoiled was Twitter, and I just don't find myself there very much anymore.
Yeah, every day I'm on there.
It's a different beast than it used to be.
Every day I'm on there, half the time it's like, oh, people who love Star Wars like me, yay. And then the other half the time it's like, this is not good. Lots of blue check marks of people saying very interesting things.
Yeah, but anybody can have a blue check mark now.
Well, that's the thing. But not anyone, only people who pay. So it's like, who's the kind of person who's going to pay to make themselves have more features on Twitter/X and make themselves look more official? There's certain criteria of people who are going to do that. Some may not fall into that criteria, but there is a.
Sometimes people just want to feel special, and then sometimes they want to make themselves look special so that you think
other people are less special.
Yeah,
it's the Animal Farm, isn't it?
Exactly.
Everyone's equal, but some are more equal than others.
Mm-hmm.
See, I haven't read the book, but I know the great sits. We're getting near the end here, but there's some other parts some beats I want to hit. So we've spoken about the characters to a degree. There's three things that I want to mention. One of them is my boy Kanan, mentioned a lot in this episode, and I'm like, I've had discussions about how critical I can be of Star Wars, and I'm just pulling on nostalgia and heartstrings, but I don't give a shit. You mention Kanan, and I'll immediately instant serotonin hit straight away,
like,
right in my veins. My boy, he's back.
Say
he's
more.
Not. Yeah, that's it. I get my eyelashes go, my eyes twinkle, I blush. I love.
Would you have been okay if they had done flashback scenes with a live action actor?
Yes, I would.
Would you want it to be Freddie Prinze Jr.?
Oh, yes, I would. I would be offended if they didn't have him. I just wanted there to be something.
Isn't that the thing with Thrawn? You would be offended if they didn't.
I'm glad they chose him. I just don't think they did the best job. I just think you can have the best actor for the job, but it doesn't mean you've got the best director or script. There are times where you have neither.
Have done more to make his face look more like it looked in this, like just the structure of his face. He has a round face. It should have been longer. Just they could have made. Come on, this is Star Wars. They create special effects like this all the time. They used to be the masters of practical effects and making new creatures. They could have made him look more like his animated version.
I feel like whatever Thrawn is going to be in next, that's where it's going to go. Because, like, for example, there were some issues. I didn't really have an issue with this, but like Ahsoka in Book of Boba Fett and Mando, like her Leku was slightly different sizes, and there were little little bits that people picked up on. Again, I didn't, because I'm just like, oh, cool, Ahsoka. I don't care how Leku's a few inches smaller than it was in Rebels. I didn't even notice. But I think with Thrawn, again, it makes it feel like a prologue, is whatever he's in next, it'll be more refined and more high quality and more, also, to be fair to them, episodes don't come out like they used to, especially not on Disney Plus. Like, I know in America you often do it like, here's a show. Okay, episode 4 is done. Let's start putting this on TV and start making episode 5. And over here in the UK, we're like, what are you doing? What is happening? Finish the show and then release it. What if there's a delay? We'll figure that out. And then there's constant delays because people get injured and then the whole show is a big jumble. But like when you do the episodic thing, you can gauge people's reactions by stuff. So if you were a couple weeks ahead, if everyone was like, oh God, Thrawn doesn't look right, in the finale, you can kind of go, let's tweak a few things here and there.
Yeah, adjust.
Exactly. But like, and I think we've recently finished Firefly, and I think Firefly did that because the special effects in Firefly in the middle and towards the end are way better than at the start. And I'm like, I know the very first episode will be a pilot anyway, but like things like that, you can see they improved it as they were going. So I wonder if just they're going to do that with Thrawn. But with the whole start bit with Huyang and Kanan being mentioned in the lightsaber stuff, like I personally loved that. What did you think of that? And what have you thought of Huyang?
So I don't get all caught up on Kanan like you do. I liked him. I didn't.
All right, podcast is over. Goodbye, Tonya.
We can have different favorites. I don't think I dislike him. I thought he was a great addition to the Star Wars universe, but I don't have the crush on him that you do.
My boy.
We already talked about my crush, and they didn't get him right. But I'm still glad that they used him as the actor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, but what about Huyang, though? What'd you think of him?
I wasn't even concerned about him. It was like, oh yeah, I kind of remember him. I enjoyed him, but I barely remembered him until like things were mentioned. It's like, oh yeah, that was him. Oh yeah, that was him. I didn't remember it even being that actor voicing him.
That actor? How dare you? David Tennant is a national
Well, did you want
treasure.
me to say it? I didn't know.
Yes, why would you say David Tennant? He's the 10th Doctor, okay? He is iconic. He's in Good Omens. He's in Jessica Jones.
Yes,
nerdy stuff. That's all I know him from. I mean, I loved Huyang, not because I knew him from Clone Wars. When he first appeared, I was like, how the hell is he still about? How did he survive the Purge? We don't know. Again, more questions.
But he's not a human. Like, it's much easier to stay alive when you can just fix your parts and upgrade.
Not if Palps is looking for you. Palps did a mass thing in the comics of burning all Jedi lightsabers that he could get his grubby little hands on.
Okay, didn't read the comics, so I didn't know that part.
It's Darth Vader 2017 comics, the best Star Wars comics in the canon. But they burn loads of lightsabers in public. It's really a big show. But Huyang,
book burning, huh?
Well, yeah, exactly. It's linking in to as we get near the end. But you'd think that the droid who is, and I'm going to say this because it was confirmed in the Timelines book, Huyang is over 25,000 years old. He was made 5 years after the Jedi Order was founded. Okay, why would Palpatine's first agenda not be, shall we stop that guy?
Get rid of the guy who has all of this knowledge.
25,000 years of Jedi knowledge and literally teaches younglings how to build lightsabers. Why don't we get rid of him first? Why is he not priority number one? Surely you can't make a new Jedi Order if you don't have the droid that's been teaching people to make lightsabers for 25,000 years. No? Okay, we'll just forget about him. I mean, the argument could be Palps didn't know about him.
Point.
But Palps knew about everything. So,
he was too busy cloning himself for, the surprise reveal at the end of the last trilogy.
Even surprised at Ian McDiarmid. I didn't realize I was coming back. It's like, no one did. It was a rush.
Right, because you weren't.
No.
Because that wasn't the plan.
No. Exactly. And I want to ask you about Night Troopers as well. What do you think about them? The zombie element of things.
It was okay. It's like, we've seen this. It was interesting that their helmets meant that they couldn't bite you, which worked against them. So, it looked cool when they were casting the spell. I thought, people are going to hate this, and I thought that the actors did well because their bodies were moving significantly different after the effect. They were no longer, able to aim properly. Not that stormtroopers are ever that great. You know what I mean? Their limbs just seemed heavier and less, like they were less in control of their body movements. So it was an interesting visual, but I was never really worried. And I think part of that was that they couldn't bite. Zombies are scary because of their bite. There was only one moment where one of them was even close to biting someone, and that was the I magically can use the Force moment.
Yeah, it's annoying. I think with all
you
of
also
shit,
have that flamethrower, which you could have just done right then, like
yeah, so blaster bolts aren't working. Why not try and melt them? No, let's not do that. But it did with the mask come off. Like, I love masks being broken and off and things and seeing bits underneath. That's all very cool. And it's really annoying because I think visually this show's probably the best show. I think it's the best live action show visually. I think Andor did some incredible stuff cinematography wise, but I think if you just extracted parts of this show and put them on like posters or visuals, like the way the Night Troopers looked pre-zombifying, incredible. Witches of Dathomir, incredible. The blood orange lightsabers, incredible.
Yes.
Like everything visually, the whole Darth Vader Anakin like change stuff is just like, when you think about how good that looks and how well it works visually, it's like, you get this. You can see he was in animation because it's all about visuals. So right. I really got those elements. It was just a lot of it. I think I said it last episode.
But those were the moments where you're watching and you're like, now you are sitting up and watching. You're like, I just want to get closer to the screen because this is so exciting. Not like, all right.
Book of Boba Fett.
Continue with whatever you're trying to force down our throats right now. Those were the, sit up and I'm not snacking, I am watching moments.
That's the thing. And I think with this show, one thing that really frustrated me that I realized in the last episode, I think with Andy, is no characters with names die in the whole series. Star Wars is literally renowned for having every character named. Okay, one character died in this one of, Morgan bloody Elsbeth, but who's boring as fuck anyway, and I knew she was going to die the moment she showed up. Right. So it's the most boring thing ever.
As soon as they made her bow,
it was like, oh no, she's all magic-y now. So, she's going to die, isn't she? It was either going to be she's going to like merge with all the witches and become like a super witch, and I was like, please, for the love of God, don't do that. And they didn't. Or she's going to become a sacrificial lamb, like in Thor 2, that guy who got all big and muscly and stuff. And I was like, that's what I thought. She's powering up to die.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she never played.
Classic Thrawn moment. We need more time. I'm not even going to say it. You're going to understand, and you're going to do it.
Yeah, which worked again.
It did.
But Morgan Elsbeth is just like.
Speaking of that, there is a moment when we were talking about our favorite moments. One of my favorite moments was with him. Where have you seen the John Wick series?
I adore all 4 John Wick films. In fact, I have a John Wick Funko Pop down here with his dog. The dog that's alive, not the one that his little Staffy. Okay. Sorry.
Right. Well, that's the thing. In the first movie, and this is definitely a spoiler, but when there's that phone call moment where the dad is like, why are you helping this guy? And he's like, your son killed his dog. Oh. When Thrawn finds out this is the Padawan of Anakin Skywalker, he has that moment. It's like, that was the exact same moment. Nothing else needs to be said. It's just, all right, change of plans. We're in very real danger. There's not going to be any negotiating with Anakin Skywalker's apprentice. We need to, let me put my thinking hat on. You guys stop fighting. You're not going to win, I'll throw you to the fodder when it's more tactical,
Oh yeah. Well, there's a book here, which I'll show you there, which I hugely recommend. It's my least favorite of the Thrawn trilogy, of the canon Thrawn trilogy, actually. However, the whole book is Thrawn in the Clone Wars meeting Anakin, and Thrawn in the Galactic, in pre-Galactic Civil War, around the time of Rebel Series 2, I think, him meeting Vader and being like, wait. And then you're seeing flashbacks of Anakin do stuff, and then Vader do similar things, and Thrawn's like...
He's putting it together.
Yeah, and there's one bit which... The dialogue is incredible, and there's one bit which...
But why is it your least favorite?
First, because the other two are so good, and there's a character called Eli Vantos in the other two, and he's amazing. But also...
So it's not that this is bad, it's that those are just...
those two, I'd say, are 9 out of 10 Star Wars books. This one, I'd say, is an 8.5. The problem is that there's a few Padme scenes in it, and they're just boring and weak. And I love Padme. But also, because this is the only book of the 3 which has flashbacks, half the book is flashback. And so, pacing-wise, inevitably, it's just gonna
I don't enjoy flashbacks in books or intros.
No, exactly. So, but I would recommend that if people get like an Audible free trial or something, just like try out that book because it's really good. And Mark Thompson, who narrates it, does an excellent voice of Thrawn that sounds just like Lars Mikkelsen. So I really recommend that because that thing with Thrawn and Vader, their
Put the link in the
interactions.
show notes so that I can check it out.
I shall. I will do that. But yeah, and there's just one interaction, which is like Thrawn references. He's like, oh yeah, when we were on that planet and did that thing. And Vader's like, I was not there. And Thrawn's like, oh yes, I must be mistaken. And then he keeps mentioning it. And Vader's getting like more agitated and Thrawn just keeps mentioning it. And it's just, you never get anyone being able to toy with Vader like that, apart from Tarkin. So it's really fun. Just that alone is worth reading that book. And it references parts in this book. There is a little bit where Padme does mention Ahsoka. And it's like very, very, very heavily insinuated that she is Anakin's apprentice. But I'll give that a slight pass. Because it was I don't know, it's like 15 years prior to what we've seen on screen and stuff. No, it was Clone Wars era. It was like 30 odd years before. So I'm like, I can kind of...
He's not really taking note of her, right? Like, why would he care that much about her?
Yeah, and, I can hand wave that away. But last thoughts. Is there anything else you want to mention about Ahsoka or about anything to do with Star Wars before we get into plugs?
I will say I was disappointed that there was no Thrawn and Hera interaction because he had something going with her. There was a relationship between them. It wasn't a romantic relationship, but there was a respect that they would battle. And he definitely respected her as a pilot and as an opponent. And there wasn't enough about him enjoying Sabine's art because that was such a cool element of the animated series that he's more than just this warlord, it's like he appreciates the finer things and he's not just stealing to steal things. He appreciates the art. I think that there could have been some callback to those moments, not just, oh, I remember you.
We should have had it on the ship because there's literally his ship.
Right.
So in theory, he could have gone down to one of the lower decks and just stood there and someone go, what you doing? And him go, well, where Sabine is now back on the planet, I'm studying her art again to remind myself of her tactics. And it's like that again.
Exactly. So those were disappointing moments because he did have interactions with these characters and then he just really didn't in this. Yeah.
Hopefully, however he comes forward in the future, which there's rumors and rumblings, but I won't tell you because you like to have a clean slate, which I do sometimes envy. There's still did feel like a bit of a prologue. I'm glad I watched it. Had some very cool moments. I loved Ezra. I think the Clone Wars flashbacks, World Between Worlds episode is a pure highlight. But again, I'm just going to probably watch that by itself and then watch a little bit of Baylan Skoll stuff. But I'm not going to watch this.
I probably will go back and watch that one and then watch pieces of this last episode. I did enjoy the names of the episodes too. I thought that
they were good.
They were mindful with that.
Yeah. And the Purga were great. Purga, like Megan's favorite part.
And the planets looked incredible. Like those red trees. I could live there. That's a place where I would love to just spend my days. And then it ends with a Star Destroyer approaching a red planet. I was like, yes.
I think that's Dathomir.
It is.
Yeah. I was like, because they've done a lot of Clone Wars connecting stuff.
From the visual, not just that it was that planet, but just the way it looked.
Agreed.
The approach, seeing the red with that approach, it was like, that's one of my favorite ships, and it was just such a good looking visual.
I agree. And I must also mention that the blade that Morgan Elsbeth was given is the Blade of Talzin, Talzin. Mother Talzin is the main Night Sister in the Clone Wars. So
I couldn't remember what series that was from. I knew it was with the witches, but like there was a specific fight. And it's like I don't remember who fought against that blade.
Oh, I couldn't remember that. I couldn't tell you that. I've only seen the Clone Wars twice through. Third time will be next year, and I'll be taking more notes. But yeah, it's the Witches of Dathomir are cool as hell. They are one of the coolest things about the Clone Wars, and there's a lot of cool stuff in the Clone Wars. But yeah, I mean, I agree with pretty much everything you've been saying here. I'm glad I watched the show. I think as a Star Wars show, it gets a thumbs up. As a general show, mid. I'm just like meh. Not going to rewatch it.
And as the Star Wars shows we've seen, this is still one of the better ones, sadly, because the others have been so disappointing. This was less disappointing than many of the other shows.
Yeah, I think it's probably as good as Mandalorian in general for me. I'm like...
Not the first 2 seasons for me.
I didn't like Series 1 that much. I thought Series 1 was quite overrated. So for me...
wrong. It's okay, Mike.
2, 3, 1 of Series of Mando. And for me, I think Ahsoka... Sorry, 2 is the best, then 3, then 1. And I think Ahsoka slips right even with Series 3 probably for me.
Yeah, I wouldn't put this higher than the first 2 seasons of Mandalorian.
Yeah. Mando Series 2 is pretty hard to beat. Unless you're Andor, and then you do. Right. Because Andor's amazing.
And here's the thing. I think part of it is the series where they're taking more well-known characters, it's harder to get it right.
Yeah.
So then you have these other series where, all right, we know this character a little bit from this movie, but we don't know that much about him. And no one's really that invested in him. He's not someone who tends to be someone's favorite character. So it's like, you better get this guy right. Whereas Obi-Wan, he has a few fans.
Just a few, maybe me as well, being one of them as well.
Right. As soon as I jumped on the call, you're all, hello there.
Yeah, I mean, I do say that quite a lot anyway. But I now that I say it, people are like, oh yeah, Star Wars. I was like, I do kind of like saying it outside of Star Wars, but it's fun because it does slightly
You say
nudge.
it with his cadence, though. You do it intentionally.
That's because I would love to be Obi-Wan, and he was my role model for many years. So that's good old Ewan McGregor.
I see it.
Yeah. I wish I was more like him in certain ways, but time I can grow into the mature Obi-Wan. Hopefully I won't have the dark days like he did. But yeah, I was going to say something else. Oh yeah, Andor. I think Andor Series 2 might be out next year as well. So that's something fun to look forward to. Bad Batch Series 3, Andor, and then another loose Mandoverse show, I guess. But yeah, show's good, but not amazing. Didn't hit the peaks it could have done, but...
Had amazing moments. And I do want to thank you for pushing me to watch Rebels and the Clone Wars, because this would have been a meh show without that. Without that going into it, without having those moments that were like, oh, I can't believe I'm seeing this in live action on screen. I can't believe they called back to that. Without that, it would have just been okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And it's another reason why I'm so happy that people watch Rebels and Clone Wars. I think you're like nearing the 10th person that I've had. Well, there's around 10 people that I've managed to push into watching Clone Wars and Rebels. And I'm like... Well, people who've directly interacted with me, and I specifically said to them, you need to do this.
And there were so many other people who pushed me toward it, but you're the one who got me to do it.
Yep. That's it. It's the pushing
which really annoys other people in my life, because I give all the credit to you. I told you, but yes, you did, but you didn't get me to watch it, did you?
That's how I roll. That's one thing you got to learn, friend. If you watched the Ahsoka series, if you loved it, you hated it, you weren't a big fan of it, any of those answers, if you haven't seen Rebels, here's the solution. Go watch Rebels. It's phenomenal. And then watch Clone Wars, because Clone Wars is very good as well.
You have to let people know that the animation is going to make you itch at first. Like, it's bad.
The Series 1 of Rebels is a bit jarring, but it never...
It's more than a bit jarring. It's like, why are you making me watch this, Mike? It's that kind of bad.
I mean, it's not... No, Clone Wars the movie's that bad, because that was like 7 years earlier. The Clone Wars movie not only is actively terrible, but the animation is so janky. And that's where people normally start. So it's like, start with Rebels, because the start of Rebels is easier to get into than the start of Clone Wars.
If people's parents raised them right, they start with the original trilogy.
Yeah, but everyone knows no one's going to be listening to our Ahsoka discussions, not seen the original trilogy of Star Wars. Don't be silly. They've seen all the 11 movies and then probably most of the live action stuff. Maybe a bit of the animation.
You
But
said
with
start.
Rebels.
Start means start.
Start the animation.
Okay.
Rebels, Clone Wars, Bad Batch. Yeah. I know you didn't do it that way. You did Clone Wars first. But again, you have to suffer through the Clone Wars movie and then Series 1 of Clone Wars. And it's just like, oh. By that
I
point,
didn't suffer through the Clone Wars movie. I enjoyed it more than you did.
I don't understand, but we don't have enough time to get into that. But friends, I will, now that Ahsoka's finished, I will be doing, and I'll let Tonya finish us out with a plug. But the next thing on the chopping block on the stuff, this feed, wherever you're watching, YouTube or listening on the Comics in Motion feed, we're going to be doing a Clone Wars rewatch. So myself, Math, and Dave, we're going to be doing, I don't know what we've called it yet. I think covering Clone Wars or something along those lines. But we're going to start off by watching Phantom Menace again. I'm not, because I've seen that film a million times. I'm going to recite almost the whole thing. But they're going to rewatch Phantom Menace, and we're all going to talk about it. Then we're going to rewatch Attack of the Clones, same thing. Then the Clone Wars movie, and then month by month, starting in 2024, we're going to delve into the Clone Wars series. So we're going to do one series a month, but a couple we're going to split because a couple is super long. So make sure you listen to Rebels Reviewed, or go watch Rebels first if you've done that. Rebels Reviewed, and then we're going to delve into the Clone Warsy stuff, and then check out some of the other things I'm up to. Follow, share, genuine chit-chat, all that usual tomfoolery. But the lovely guest here to finish off 8 episodes of Ahsoka, which is 7 episodes of the Ahsoka discussion show. If I had 654, then it would have been really smooth, but I didn't have anything. Tonya, what are you doing in this world that you can talk about, because you've got a lot of fun stuff going on in the background? What are you doing right now, and what links do you want me to put in the description for you?
What am I doing right now? Let me narrow it down to the things that are relevant to this week/month. How about that?
Mm-hmm. Do it.
So we are right in the middle of Banned Books Week. We're actually recording this midway through it, and I have had phenomenal guests on that show. We talked about, I read 7 different books and then had 7 different panel discussions about each of these books. So 7 shows, 1 show per day, starting on the 1st of October. And what we're doing is just discussing different banned books, the reasons they were banned, why you should read banned books, and what the state of the world is right now with the upswing in book bannings. And when we started doing this last year, it was just starting to get really bad. It wasn't the reason for doing the banned book show, but by the time it actually aired, it was, oh my goodness, this show was needed. And so I have an incredible group of people who are helping me, including Mike, who has done the graphics. There's Tony and Rhea helping to upload and do the back end of the audio podcast. There's JP Butler doing the video part of it, which is going up on YouTube. This year, Susan Jocelyn did the show notes for me. They're not quite as great as Mike's show notes, but they're definitely better than anything I could do. Spider Dan is doing all of the reels. So grabbing a piece of the conversation and letting us post that as well. So it's just this wonderful group of people who are assisting for no other reason than they understand this is a great cause, and most of them have been guests on the show. Mike has not been a guest on the show yet.
That's correct.
But that's because he's too busy reading Star Wars books.
I've taken a break at the moment. I've read, I'm aiming to finish 3 non-Star Wars books before High Republic Phase 3 kicks off. One by Mr. Tony Farina, or A.R. Farina as his pen name. But the one I'm reading at the moment is a moral philosophy book. So maybe next year, if you tell me early enough in advance some of the books, I'll be able to. If you give me a month warning, I don't read a Star Wars book in a month.
You know what? It was in the Discord channel. I posted it and you didn't respond, so I figured he's not interested. But I can ask you personally. I think you've done enough that I could maybe, I don't know, message you on my own.
Message me before anyone else and say, hey, here's some of the books I'm thinking of. Which one do you want to tackle the most? And then I'll start listening 8 months before.
Or if you come across a banned book that you want to discuss, let me know before I make my list.
When you did banned books before, I was like, I wonder what the banned books. I looked and there's a list of hundreds and I'm like, no, I'll give you a little hint here. I've not read any of them. Okay. I've barely read any Shakespeare. I've read 1 Jane Austen novel and 1 adaptation. and I've not read any other major books apart from I think of Mice and Men in school. That I've not read any George Orwell. I've not read any big hitters in classical or normal literature.
Let's change that over the next year.
Yeah, by you telling me 7 books you're going to read, and I'll choose one.
Well, Megan was on the show last year. Just saying.
Yeah, because you did her favorite book series of all time, Harry Potter. Yeah. If a Star Wars book gets banned, I'll be right on there.
You'll be first in line.
Like, yeah, I'll be generally offended. Yeah, I'll be actually offended if there was a Star Wars book banned, and then I'm not invited on to talk about it.
I'm sure Mike's too busy. I won't even ask him.
Yeah, don't even ask. Just release the episode. Just send me, can you do this artwork for the episode? And it's a Star Wars one. I'll be like, what have you done? But friends, please listen to Banned Books, because although I'm not on it, which might be a benefit, who knows on your listening preferences, but they are. I've already started. I finished off last year's a while ago, friends, and I've already started on this year's. It's really, really great. You don't have to have read the books. That's a very key thing here. You don't have to have read the books to enjoy. Obviously, if you have read the books, there's a good place to start, but you don't have to have read them. It's a real good introduction to the books, and it just means that you have an idea of if someone talks about a certain book around you, you A, know it was banned, B, know some of the reasons it was banned, 3, know a degree of the subject matter and the content. So you kind of have a publisher summary interpreted by some really passionate, intelligent people, including Ms. Tonya Todd here. So it's like all of these things put together. It's just a real great podcast to listen to, even if you're a literary scrub like me and don't read enough non-Star Wars books.
And here's the thing. We don't just have these people who are so highly educated talking about, blah, 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 this is why this is bad. There's a mix of people. And it's so funny because you see people having imposter syndrome, thinking that they can't add to the conversation. And then they'll be the most passionate person on the show and have everyone in tears. And it's like, you don't have to go to college to be able to do that. And now you're inspiring people to care and to do things and to act and to fight this fight. So you can be a literary scrub and still make a difference.
It's almost like they're the kind of words that Ahsoka would say. Very inspiring. Very inspiring.
Let me stand here and cross my arms like Ahsoka.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Perfectly done. Well, friends, all the details are going to be in the show notes. Make sure you subscribe to Ms. Tonya Todd's YouTube channel. Link to that will be in the show notes. And you can listen to the Banned Books conversations on the Femon Collective's podcast feed or the Comics in Motion feed. Or if you really want to support, listen to them both, one after another.
And the YouTube channel.
Yep. And if you want to watch the video versions as well, there's the YouTube of Ms. Tonya Todd, again, in the description. So there's all kinds of,
then
3 times.
See all of the lovely guests and watch their passion and see their eyes tear up or see them get really angry.
That's what you do it for. It's the fun. It's the fun of it all. And the passion
it's for the ripples. It's the ripples that we are creating across this world.
Indeed. And, more water metaphors and things. Linking in with Ahsoka again. Very nice. Her water.
And then I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't mention the film that I am doing this month. I have my directorial debut at the end of this month, really the last 2 weeks of this month. I have adapted the first short story that I ever had published into a short film. And it's going to be, so it's the first short film I ever wrote. It's the first short story I ever wrote. And now it's going to be the first short film that I ever direct. And we are doing a crowdfunder for this on seedandspark.com. The film is called Morning Sacrifice, and that's morning with a U. So the sacrifice does happen in the morning, spoiler alert.
Well, I've already contributed because I believe and trust in you in anything that you do. So, other people should, if not hearing for your passion in this conversation, check out the Banned Book stuff, all of it, hear the passion, see what Tonya's all about, and then go and give what you can to help her continue on her journey in any way that you can. And if you can't afford, then just share and get some rich friends and get them to contribute.
Right, or just follow the campaign, because if we get enough followers on the campaign, followers are free for you. If we get enough followers, we get incentives from Seed and Spark. So they start throwing in stuff, and all you have to do is click that button. But yes, definitely share and mention it to people who want to invest in a film. The incentives are really cool. And we already sold out of name a character. Like those went the fastest. But There's a victim board. You can be one of the victims on the board. If you are in Las Vegas or can get to Las Vegas, there's a vampire photo shoot, which was a pretty amazing gift that was donated to our cause. Like, oh, sure. Just, $1,200 worth of photo shoot. Just because, like you, they understand that this is very passionate for me and I would do anything I could to help him. He's doing this to help me. And I appreciate Richard Mathis and his studio for throwing in like this. We have Spider Dan, who did all of the lovely visuals for those incentives. And then Rhea is putting a little advert at the beginning of every Femon episode, which was entirely her idea. Like, well, thank you for that. So this whole October has just been a lesson in, I have all of these wonderful, amazing people surrounding me who are helping me with my journey. And I can't wait to be successful enough that I can just carry you all with me and do all of this stuff together. And I don't know, maybe actually pay you for all this work that you're doing for me.
Well, I wouldn't expect any financial, anything like that from you at any point. Just keep being a guest on my podcast, even if when you become super famous and rich, and then I'll just use
How about I get involved with the Star Wars universe and I invite you to all the cool parties?
I mean, that would be amazing, but Megan would never forgive me for wiping all our savings from flying over there constantly. That would be... That'd be a straight on the relationship. Oh, Tanya's just invited me to this other Star Wars thing. It's like, you're never home. It's like in a galaxy far, far away.
You would have to come too. What do you mean? Not just you, both of you.
She won't listen to this podcast. She won't know.
I'll work on it.
Indeedy. But yeah, friends, support Tanya where you can. Links in the description to everything that she's up to and all that incredible stuff. Thank you so much for listening to I assume, all of the episodes of this Ahsoka discussion show. There will be more when there's more live action stuff. I think the next thing is Skeleton Crew, which is next year. It's either that or Andor next, but it won't be to 2024. And then we will, in the meantime, be doing the Clone Wars rewatch, starting with a few bonus things. But friends, thank you so much for listening as always. Tanya, it's always an absolute pleasure having you on and being able to speak with you about anything, especially Star Wars. And friends, may the Force be with you.
Meow.